when the toughest alien in the academy decided it would be funny to publicly humiliate a human girl, he had no clue he was poking someone who'd already lived through a real war. Now, I'm not going to pretend I predicted what happened next, because I didn't. None of us did. But when Vorac picked that particular Thursday afternoon to single out the new human, let's just say the universe showed off its twisted sense of humor, the kind that laughs right before everything explodes. My name's Zarek, and I'm about as average as they come at the Galactic Combat Academy. I'm average height for a Keltorian, pull average scores in my classes, and don't really stand out in any meaningful way, which, honestly, suits me just fine. Being average means I've learned when to keep my head down and my mandibles firmly shut whenever trouble starts looking for volunteers. And that day, trouble was absolutely sniffing around Training Hall 7. Training Hall 7 is enormous, because of course it is. The ceiling rises so high you could stack 3 cruiser-class ships one on top of the other and still have clearance. The floor is reinforced to the point it could survive orbital bombardment, and judging by the stains, it's seen more blood than most military trauma wards. The walls are lined with enough weapons to start a war, or finish one. The place always smells the same, too. Ozone from the shields, sweat from a dozen species, and that sharp edge of fear blended with determination. It's not pleasant, but after a while, your senses stop complaining. There were around 40 of us inside that afternoon, grinding through our usual conditioning drills. Well, most of us were, anyway. Vorac wasn't. Vorac never did usual. He stood dead center in the sparring ring, all 7 feet and 4 inches of solid Vorthian muscle on full display. His black scales reflected the overhead lights like polished obsidian. His chest was wide enough to land a shuttle on, and all 4 of his arms were folded in that very specific way that says, someone is about to have a very bad day. His crest was fully flared, too, which for a Vorthian only means one of 2 things, a mating challenge or a threat. And believe me, romance was not in the air. Vorac had a reputation, and not the kind you want attached to your name. 17 students sent to the medical bay in 6 months. 0 disciplinary reports. That happens when your family has political connections strong enough to make instructors suddenly very interested in their data pads. Back on Vorthia Prime, Vorac had been some kind of champion fighter, and apparently that entitled him to treat the rest of us like disposable training equipment. Then there was Maya Caldwell, human, female. She stood about 5'6", which by academy standards is borderline comedic. Maybe 130 pounds, and that's being generous. She had brown hair pulled back into a simple tail, no scales, no exoskeleton, no natural armor of any kind. Just soft pink skin that honestly looked like it would tear if someone sneezed too aggressively nearby. She'd been at the academy for 3 weeks and mostly kept to herself. Quiet, reserved, the kind of presence that blends into the background so completely you forget she's there at all. Which, ironically, is exactly why Vorac noticed her. Bullies always seem to have a 6th sense for quiet people. "Hey, human!" Vorac's voice thundered across the hall, and I swear the temperature dropped a few degrees. Everything stopped. Every drill, every conversation, every movement froze. If anyone in the room had feathers, you would have heard one hit the floor. "I've been watching you," he continued. "You move like a sick grinder cub. Pathetic." Maya had been at the weight station, carefully setting down a barbell. Yeah, okay. It was lighter than what most of us used. She turned slowly to face him, her expression completely empty. No fear, no anger, just blank. That should have been his first warning, but Vorac wasn't exactly famous for his attention to detail. "I'm talking to you, meat sack," he said as he stalked toward her, moving like he owned the place. And honestly, with his family's pull, he pretty much did. 3 weeks here, and you haven't sparred even once. Afraid you'll break? Not interested, Maya replied. Her voice was quiet and steady, carrying a clipped, precise accent. Earthborn, North American, if my xenolinguistics training was worth anything. Vorac laughed, the sound like boulders grinding together. Not interested. You don't get to be not interested human. This is the Combat Academy. You fight, he said, stepping right up into her space, or you leave. So which is it? Standing that close, the size difference was ridiculous. A mountain looming over a pebble. Honestly, it was almost funny. I'd rather not, Maya said calmly. She even stepped back, hands relaxed at her sides, non-threatening, submissive, about as peaceful as you can look in a room designed for violence. That's when Vorac made his mistake. Circle, now. He pointed at the sparring ring with one of his lower arms. Unless you want everyone here to know humans are as weak as they look. And let's be honest, he added, you are. By then, the crowd had fully formed. Students from half a dozen species ringed the circle, some already holding up recording devices. Because nothing screams academic excellence like filming someone getting publicly wrecked for entertainment. Maya glanced at the ring, then back at Vorac, and finally toward the observation platform where Instructor Kelrix stood. The lanky Thracian hadn't even looked up, too busy scrolling through something on his datapad. Fine, Maya said. She walked toward the circle without another word, and that, right there, was the moment I should have realized we were all about to learn something. Now, before I explain how this turned into a master class in cosmic humility, you need some context. Because context matters when you're about to witness a lesson delivered the hard way. Humans had only been admitted to the Galactic Combat Academy for about 2 years. 2 years. In galactic terms, that's barely a blink. The Academy itself has been around for centuries, training the best warriors, tacticians, and security specialists known to civilized space. Graduates go on to command planetary defense forces, lead fleet security divisions, and guard targets so valuable entire wars have been fought over them. This place doesn't just have a reputation, it has the reputation. If you survive 4 years here, you can go anywhere you want afterward. Name your price. Pick your posting. So when the Terran Federation finally got approved and started sending candidates, we were curious, sure, but mostly skeptical. Humans were newcomers, having made first contact only 40 years earlier, and their physiology was, well, underwhelming. No natural weapons, no armor, strength that barely rated average by most species standards. And they came from a planet with an almost embarrassing gravity level, 1.0 G. I've seen cargo moons with higher gravity than Earth, but the Galactic Council loves its quotas and diversity initiatives. And apparently, that's how Maya Caldwell ended up standing across from Vorac in Training Hall 7. So there we were, training shoulder to shoulder, with beings who honestly looked like a stiff breeze might fold them in half. Vorac, meanwhile, was Academy royalty, if you can call it that. 32 official sparring matches, undefeated. 3 consecutive wins at the Vorthian Tri-Continental Combat Championships before he'd even bothered enrolling here. On top of that, his family controlled about half the mining operations in the system, which meant credits. And credits meant influence. And influence meant you could put 17 students in the medical bay and walk away without so much as a warning slap. Oh, the academy administrators would wring their hands, make concerned noises, and file reports, but nothing ever stuck. The Vorthian embassy would place a call. A few credit transfers would quietly happen, and suddenly the whole thing was reclassified as an unfortunate training incident. Most of us learned pretty quickly to stay out of his path. It wasn't cowardice. It was survival math. Maya, though? Maya barely existed on the radar. In 3 weeks, I'd heard her speak maybe 10 times total, always short, always polite. She showed up on time, finished every assignment, never complained, never drew attention. During combat drills, she practiced alone in a corner. During tactical briefings, she took notes quietly. At meals, she sat by herself, eating while reading something on her data pad. The instructors barely noticed her at all, which I figured was exactly how she preferred it. Instructor Kalrix was textbook academy staff, competent, exhausted, and emotionally hollowed out by 2 decades of teaching. He observed from his platform, corrected technique, logged notes, and enforced rules when it didn't inconvenience him too much. The real issue was this: sparring challenges were allowed. Not just allowed, encouraged. Academy doctrine claimed they built resilience and adaptability as long as both participants agreed. And technically, Maya had agreed. Never mind that she'd been verbally backed into a corner. Around me, students were already pulling out credit chips. Droven, a Manthari with more money than sense, was offering 5-to-1 odds on Vorthac winning in under 30 seconds. A group of Kaldorians were laughing, betting on whether Maya would cry before or after the first hit. Someone behind me muttered that Medical Bay should prep a bed now and save everyone some time. No one, and I mean no one, was betting on the human. Looking back, that should embarrass us all. The sparring circle itself is simple enough. 20 feet across, outlined by a glowing blue energy field that keeps combat contained and blocks outside interference. Academy regulation, supposedly designed to ensure fairness. In reality, it just guaranteed we all had perfect seats for what everyone assumed would be a slaughter. Vorthac stepped into the circle first, of course. Showmanship was half his personality. He rolled all 4 shoulders, cracked his neck with a sound like snapping timber, then did this little hop-step routine that made the reinforced floor shudder. The man was built like a living tank. Dark green scales with black striping, polished until they reflected the lights with every movement. Each forearm was thicker than Maya's entire torso, muscles bunched and rippling under his hide. His tail, 6 feet long and tipped with a heavy bony club, swung behind him like a wrecking ball searching for a target. Then Maya entered the circle. The contrast was so extreme I almost laughed. Almost. She wore standard academy training gear, loose gray synthetic fabric that hung on her smaller frame. No armor. This was supposed to be a light sparring match, though I seriously doubted anyone had told Vorthac that part. Her arms were bare below the elbows, toned but slender, veins visible under pale skin. Her hands were taped at the knuckles, which felt optimistic. What exactly was she planning to do? Punch him? She'd shatter every bone in her hand before she even scratched his scales. By now, The crowd had grown to at least 60 students, forming a wide arc around the ring. The noise level climbed fast, voices in a dozen languages overlapping, translation implants struggling to keep up. The atmosphere shifted from routine boredom to sharp anticipation. Bloodsport, it turns out, is universal. Up on the observation platform, Instructor Kalrix finally looked up from his data pad. His 3 eyes narrowed as they locked onto the circle. I saw his hand drift toward the emergency stop control, then pause. He hesitated, probably running the same calculation we all were. Technically legal, technically consensual, technically not his problem until someone was seriously injured. He lowered his hand and kept watching. Big mistake. Vorac raised all 4 arms, flexing for the audience, his crest fully extended in a threat display. "Try not to die too quickly, human," he growled. "I want to enjoy this." Maya didn't respond. She just stood there, hands loose at her sides, weight evenly balanced. Her face stayed blank, but her eyes didn't. Her gaze tracked everything. Vorac's stance, his weight shifts, the motion of his tail, the positioning of his arms. She was reading him the way a mechanic reads a schematic. Quiet, focused, clinical. "Ready positions," Instructor Kalrix called, his voice amplified and bored. Vorac dropped into a combat stance, all 4 arms raised, claws extended. Maya didn't move. She stood relaxed, almost casual, like she was waiting for a shuttle to dock. That should have been warning number 2. "Begin," Instructor Kalrix announced. And that's when the galaxy started learning a very uncomfortable lesson about humans. Vorac moved first. I'll give him that. He was fast for something that size. He closed the distance in 3 massive strides, all 4 arms swinging down in a hammer strike that would have turned Maya into a very flat, very dead smear on the mat. Except she wasn't there anymore. Maya slipped aside, not jumped, not dodged, slipped, like water flowing around a rock. Barely any wasted motion, maximum efficiency. Vorac's fists slammed into the mat where she'd been standing a fraction of a second earlier. The impact sent a shock wave through the floor that I felt up through my legs. Before Vorac could even recover, Maya moved in, not away, in, right into his reach, which was exactly where you never wanted to be when fighting a Vorthian. Vorac's arms were his main weapons. Everybody knew that. You kept your distance, used range, stayed out of reach. Getting close was how you died. Apparently, Maya never got that memo. Her elbow, yes, her fragile little human elbow, snapped upward and slammed into a narrow gap between Vorac's chest plates, right below where his secondary arms joined his torso. It was a surgical strike, aimed at a vulnerability most people didn't even know existed. Vorac made a noise I had never heard a Vorthian make before. Half cough, half wheeze. He staggered back a half step, eyes wide with something that looked a lot like shock. The crowd went quiet, not silent, just stunned. That heavy, confused hush where everyone is trying to understand what they just witnessed and failing. "Did she just—" someone behind me started. "No way," someone else finished. Vorac recovered quickly, because champions don't stay confused for long. But that moment of surprise, it was there, just long enough to save her. His crest flared even wider, which I didn't think was physically possible. His tail snapped around in a vicious arc, aimed straight for Maya's head. She dipped under it smoothly, like silk sliding off glass. The tail hissed through empty air where her skull had been a heartbeat earlier. If it had connected, it would have taken her head clean off. No debate. but it didn't connect. Maya stepped back inside his guard again, and this time her fist, her small, taped human fist, drove into the nerve cluster on Vorthak's lower left arm. I recognized the spot immediately. Xenobiology class. Highly sensitive area in Vorthians. What I didn't know was that hitting it would cause the entire arm to go limp. Vorthak's lower left arm dropped uselessly at his side. Apparently, Maya knew exactly what she was doing. "What is happening?" Droven muttered next to me. His betting chip was still clenched in his hand, completely forgotten. "I have no idea," I said, and for once, I meant it. Vorthak roared then, actually roared. The sound thundered through the hall like a shuttle engine spooling up. He wasn't just angry anymore. He was furious, and worse, embarrassed. That combination is dangerous in any species, but in Vorthians? Pride is sacred. Losing face hurts more than losing blood. He launched into a flurry of attacks, 3 functional arms moving in tight, coordinated patterns. The strikes were pure textbook Vorthian combat. Aggressive, overwhelming, meant to smash through defenses with speed and brute force. Maya slipped through them like they were happening in slow motion. Head movement, footwork, body angles, every punch missed by inches. Every grab found nothing but air. That's when it clicked for me. She wasn't faster than him. She was reading him. She was seeing his tells, the weight shifts, the muscle tension, the pre-movement signals the rest of us never noticed, and acting before the strike even started. Up on the observation platform, Instructor Kelrix stood up. His hand hovered over the emergency stop again. I could see the conflict written all over his angular face. This was getting out of hand. Someone should stop this, but he didn't. Vorthak's confusion curdled into something uglier. His crest stood so rigid it looked painful, and foam started forming at the edges of his mouth. "Stop moving and fight me, you coward!" he bellowed. Then he charged. All 7 feet of him, all that mass and fury, thrown forward like a living battering ram. Maya's expression didn't change. Still calm, still focused, still disturbingly blank. And that's when a cold realization settled in my chest. She wasn't trying yet. This was her being careful. Vorthak finally abandoned technique altogether. He dropped the formal stances and went feral. No structure, no discipline, just raw violence from a predator who had finally understood he was in a real fight. He came at her with everything, claws slashing, tail whipping, body weight crashing forward, a wild swing from his upper right arm, a sweeping strike from his lower left, tail cutting for her legs while his remaining good arm lunged for a grapple. It was chaos. Brutal. Relentless. The kind of assault that should have ended the fight on the spot. Maya dropped low, rolled under his reach, and came up behind him in one smooth motion. Her leg snapped out, striking the back of his knee. I heard something pop. Not a break, but definitely not good. Vorthak's leg buckled for just a second. A second was all she needed. Her palm slammed into the base of his spine, right where the tail connected. Another nerve cluster. Vorthak's tail went dead instantly, slumping onto the mat like discarded rope. "Ancestors preserve us," someone whispered nearby. "A Threshian, I think." See, most species have honor codes when it comes to combat. Rules, traditions, proper techniques passed down over generations. Even in violent fights there's artistry. You prove superiority through mastery and form. Humans apparently don't care about any of that. Maya's fighting style wasn't elegant, it wasn't pretty. It was practical, efficient, and absolutely ruthless. Every motion had a purpose. Every strike went straight for something that would fail. She wasn't trying to beat Vorac in a contest of strength, and she definitely wasn't trying to prove she was better than him. What she was doing was dismantling him, piece by piece, like a mechanic calmly taking apart a broken machine. Vorac spun around, favoring his damaged leg, and threw out a desperate combination of strikes. Maya blocked the first, redirected the second, and slipped past the third like it barely existed. Then her knuckles snapped forward into his throat, right above the chest plates. Not hard enough to crush his windpipe, she absolutely could have, but hard enough to make breathing a serious problem. He staggered back, choking, gasping for air, and that's when I noticed something important. The crowd wasn't cheering anymore. We were standing there in stunned silence, watching everything we thought we understood about combat get shoved out the nearest airlock. "She's toying with him," I said without thinking. The Keltorian next to me, a third year named Saljan, shook his head slowly. "That isn't toying," Corthan said quietly. "That's control, complete control." And he was right. Maya could have ended this already, easily. The throat strike could have been fatal. The spinal hit could have left Vorac paralyzed for life. She was choosing not to do that. She was pulling her blows, limiting damage, fighting with a kind of restraint that was somehow more terrifying than outright savagery. Up on the platform, Instructor Kelran finally moved. He hurried toward the control panel, all three of his eyes locked on the sparring circle, mandibles clicking in that sharp, irregular way that signaled Thracian agitation. He'd seen enough. His hand reached for the emergency stop. But Vorac didn't quit. Blood was leaking from his mouth now. His scales were cracked in 3 separate places. Still, he refused to back down. Pride, stupid, stubborn, Vorthian pride, he charged her again, and this time there was no finesse left in him. He was injured, winded, desperate. His strikes were wild, uncoordinated. No strategy, no thought, just a wounded animal lashing out at whatever had hurt it. Maya adjusted instantly. Where she'd been defensive before, she shifted gears. She stepped directly into his rush, caught his upper right arm with both hands, and used his own momentum against him. The throw was simple, clean, perfect. One moment Vorac was charging, the next, all 7 feet and 4 inches of him was airborne. He hit the mat hard enough to crack the reinforced flooring. The impact echoed through the hall like a gunshot. Nyrex's credit chip slipped from his fingers and clattered across the floor. Forgotten. "By the void," someone whispered. Vorac tried to rise. He actually tried. Got his hands under himself, pushed up, made it halfway to his knees. His crest was still extended, but now it was shaking, trembling with exhaustion or shock. Probably both. Maya stood over him, calm, steady, not even breathing hard. And that's when it finally clicked for me. The precision, the anatomical knowledge, the deliberate targeting of weak points, the control, the absence of wasted motion. "She has military training," I said. Talvin turned toward me. "What?" "Military training," I repeated. "Real military, not academy drills." I swallowed. "She isn't a student. She's a soldier." Up on the platform, Morvex slammed the emergency stop. The energy field flared bright red, signaling a forced halt. Too late. Way too late. The red light washed over the circle, but Vorac either didn't see it or didn't care. Probably didn't care. His pride was shattered, his reputation was in ruins. And more than 60 students had just watched a human half his size tear him apart like cheap furniture. So he made one last decision, a catastrophic one. He grabbed a training blade from the equipment rack at the edge of the circle. The crowd gasped, sharp and collective, the sound people make when they watch someone step off a cliff. Training blades are dulled, sure, but they're still weapons. Bringing one into an unarmed sparring match wasn't just against regulations. It was grounds for immediate expulsion. Or it would have been, if Vorac hadn't been the son of a mining baron. "Vorac, stand down immediately!" Commander Zalthir's voice boomed through the speakers, but he was still 20 feet from the manual override. The emergency stop wasn't instant. It took seconds. Seconds Vorac used to lunge at Maya, blade extended. Here's what I expected. I expected her to retreat, to create distance, to call for help, to do literally anything a sane person would do when a 7-foot armored alien charged them with a weapon. Here's what actually happened. Maya moved forward. She closed the distance before Vorac could build momentum, stepped inside the arc of his swing, and caught his wrist with both hands. Her entire body rotated, hips, shoulders, core, using leverage and mechanical advantage. There was a wet, awful cracking sound that turned my stomach. Vorac's wrist didn't break. It snapped. Bone separation, ligaments tearing. The blade clattered harmlessly onto the mat. But Maya wasn't finished. Her knee drove up into his midsection, fast and brutal, straight into the solar plexus equivalent where all the nerve clusters met. The air blasted out of him in a horrible wheeze. His legs failed. As he fell, Maya rode him down, controlling his descent with one hand while her elbow slammed into the side of his head. Not the temple. That would have killed him. She hit just behind the auditory ridge where the skull was thickest. Maximum disorientation, minimal permanent damage. Vorac hit the mat face first. His crest collapsed flat against his skull. His breathing came out ragged and wet and wrong. Blood pooled beneath his face, dark green spreading across the gray mat. One of his secondary arms bent at an angle that made my spine ache just looking at it. The energy field dropped. Threxil vaulted the railing, moving faster than I'd ever seen a Threshian move, his medical emergency beacon already screaming. The high-pitched wail filled the hall, summoning immediate response. The arena went silent. Not quiet. Silent. 60 students, 6 species, all capable of noise, and nobody made a sound. We just stood there, staring, trying to process what we'd witnessed. Maya stood over Vorac's unconscious body, chest rising and falling in slow, controlled breaths. Her hands were still taped. There was a little blood on her knuckles. Could have been hers. Could have been his. Her training uniform wasn't even rumpled. She looked down at Vorac with an expression I can only describe as disappointment. Not satisfaction, not triumph. Just disappointment. Like the whole thing had been a pointless waste of her time. "Step back, now!" Threxil barked the order as he reached the edge of the circle, his voice tight with barely contained panic. Medical drones were already dropping from the ceiling, scanners active, trauma kits deploying mid-air. Maya stepped back. 2 precise steps, hands relaxed at her sides, waiting. "I told him I'd rather not," she said. Her voice hadn't changed at all. Same calm, even tone as before, like she'd turned down a lunch invitation, not just put the Academy's golden boy into critical condition. The medical team flooded the circle. Stabilization fields snapped into place. Biomonitors began chirping urgent alerts. Someone shouted about internal bleeding. Another called out fractured skeletal plates. Instructor Kelrix rounded on Maya, all three of his eyes wide, mandibles clicking rapidly. "You do not move, do not speak. Security is on the way." Maya nodded once, compliant, cooperative. I looked around at the other students. Virex's mouth was hanging open. Shakor's scales had faded to a sickly pale. A Kaldorian in the back was visibly shaking. And me? I couldn't stop staring at Maya's hands. Still taped, still ready. Like she'd been prepared for this exact moment all along, like she'd known exactly how this would end the instant Vorac forced her into that circle. And with a cold weight settling in my gut, I realized something. She really had tried to warn him. She genuinely would have preferred not to do this. The medical team had Vorac loaded onto a hover stretcher in under 90 seconds, which was impressive even by academy standards. His vitals were stable, but only barely. 3 cracked ribs, a fractured wrist, a severe concussion, a dislocated shoulder. Enough soft tissue damage to put him in regeneration therapy for at least a week, maybe 2. He would live, he would recover, but his undefeated record was officially dead. Security arrived moments later. 2 massive Bronthard guards in full tactical gear stormed in, which seemed excessive, until I remembered they had no idea what they were walking into. For all they knew, this was an active threat scenario. When they spotted Maya, 5'6", standing calmly with her hands visible, I swear one of them looked genuinely confused. "This is the individual?" the lead guard asked Kelrin, his deep voice vibrating through the floor. "Yes," Kelrin replied. He sounded exhausted, completely drained. The guard looked Maya up and down, then at the blood pooling on the mat, then back at Maya again. "Understood. Miss, you'll need to come with us for questioning." "Of course," Maya said, polite, cooperative, like she was being asked to fill out paperwork, not escorted after hospitalizing a fellow student. "Wait!" Kelren raised one long-fingered hand. He turned toward Maya, lowering his voice, but we were close enough to hear every word. "Before you go, explain. You've been here 3 weeks, no sparring, no combat drills, nothing. Then this. How?" Maya was quiet for a moment. For the first time, her expression shifted. Resignation, maybe. Acceptance. "I tried to avoid this," she said. "I told him I'd rather not. I meant it." "That doesn't answer my question." "Terran Federation Marines," Maya said simply. 8 years, 3 combat deployments. She paused. "Close quarters combat instructor for the last 2. I came here to learn command and tactics, not because I needed combat training. I already have that." The silence afterward was crushing. Instructor Kelrix's mandibles stopped clicking. He just stared at her. "You are military," he said finally. "Was," Maya corrected. "Honorably discharged 6 months ago. All of this is in your application file. Your file says you have prior self-defense training." "That's technically accurate," Maya replied, and I swear I caught the faintest trace of sarcasm. "Marines do learn self-defense, among other things." My sense of reality tilted. We'd all seen the human application files when they first arrived. Short summaries, academic records, basic background info. Prior self-defense training could mean anything, from a weekend class to something more serious. We'd assumed weekend class? Why wouldn't we? We'd assumed humans were soft, new, inexperienced. We were wrong. Around me, I saw the same realization spreading. Yevrin was scrolling furiously through his datapad, reading fast, his scales shifting colors in visible distress. Droven just stood there, staring at his forgotten credit chip on the floor like it might explain the universe. "The Academy administration will review this incident," Instructor Kelrick said, visibly forcing himself back into instructor mode. "There will be questions, many of them." "I understand," Maya said. "For what it's worth," Instructor Kelrick added quietly. "He shouldn't have grabbed that blade. That was his choice, not yours." Maya nodded. She didn't argue. Security escorted her out, and every single one of us watched her go. She walked with perfect posture, head high, shoulders back, military bearing. How had we missed that? After she left, the hall stayed silent for a full minute. Then slowly, voices returned. Quiet at first, then louder, urgent. Data pads came out. Files were opened. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know about humans, about Earth, about their military history. What we found wasn't comforting. Humans had been fighting wars for their entire recorded history. Thousands of years of continuous conflict, adaptation, and innovation in killing. They had developed hundreds of martial art systems. Their military training was considered extreme even by their own standards. And we had thought they were soft. Instructor Kelrick stood alone in the circle, staring at the blood on the mat. I heard him mutter something in his native language. My translator didn't catch it, but I'm pretty sure it was a curse. The Academy's official response came 3 hours later. After a full investigation, it was ruled that Maya Caldwell acted in self-defense after Vorac introduced a weapon into an unarmed sparring match. No disciplinary action. Case closed. Vorac's family tried to make a fuss afterward, which honestly surprised no one. But even with all their influence and political pull, they couldn't argue with the security footage. The recordings made it painfully clear who escalated the situation and who simply responded. For the first time in his entire academy career, Vorac didn't get a free pass. He was suspended for a month. On top of that, he was ordered into mandatory anger management counseling and placed on probation. And just like that, the whole student body learned a lesson we probably should have known already. Assumptions can come back to bite you hard. Now, here we are, 2 months later, and I still catch myself thinking about that day in Training Hall 7. It's funny how a single fight can rearrange your entire understanding of the world. I see Maya around campus all the time now. She still keeps mostly to herself. She still eats alone. Still sits quietly during tactical briefings, taking meticulous notes. The difference is simple. No one messes with her anymore. Not even a little. People give her space now. Not because they're scared exactly, but because they respect her. The kind of respect you reserve for someone who's proven they're precisely as dangerous as necessary, and not a fraction more. Sometimes she nods at me when we pass in the corridors. I nod back. We've never actually talked, but there's an understanding there. I was one of the idiots who underestimated her, and she knows it. Somehow, that's fine. Vorac eventually came back to class after his suspension. He's quieter now, less loud, less sure of himself. He even apologized to 3 students he'd previously hospitalized, which shocked everyone who heard about it. He still trains hard, still competes, but the arrogance is gone. In its place is something that looks a lot like wisdom. I guess getting dismantled by someone half your size will do that to you. It teaches you that strength isn't just about muscle mass or thick scales. The academy itself has changed too, subtly but undeniably. Instructors pay closer attention to the human students now, not with suspicion, but with genuine curiosity. Like they're all asking the same question. What else did we get wrong? What other assumptions did we never bother to challenge? The combat curriculum was quietly updated to include human martial arts as an elective. It filled up almost immediately. Turns out a lot of species are interested in learning how to fight effectively, without relying on claws, armor, or natural weapons. The galaxy, it seems, is still learning how to process humanity. We assumed that because humans lack scales, talons, natural armor, and come from a relatively low-gravity world, they must be fragile. What we forgot was that maybe, just maybe, a species that survived without those advantages developed something else instead. Better tools, better methods. Humans are persistence hunters. We know that now. They evolved by chasing prey over vast distances until it simply collapsed from exhaustion. They specialize in endurance, planning, tool use, and tactics to overcome enemies that are physically superior. Because on Earth, everything was physically superior, and humans got very, very good at winning anyway. I watch Maya sometimes during sparring drills. She started participating again, but only with students who approach respectfully and ask. She's a good instructor, patient, precise, and careful. She pulls her strikes, controls every engagement, and makes sure everyone walks away having learned something and not needing medical attention. Exactly like she tried to do with Vorac before he forced her hand. The human delegation at the Academy has grown since then. 15 new students arrived just last month, with more scheduled for next semester. The Galactic Council fast-tracked several applications, apparently deciding that letting humans into the Academy was suddenly a very smart move. Funny how fast politics change when reality hits you in the face. I graduated last week. Top 15% of my class, which I'm proud of. I accepted a position with a multi-species security firm operating in the neutral zones. Good pay, solid benefits, interesting work. During my exit interview, the career counselor asked if I had any advice for incoming students. I thought about it for a second and smiled. Yeah, I said, don't pick fights with humans. And if one of them says they'd rather not, believe them. She looked confused, so I told her the story. She listened quietly, her eyes widening, mandibles clicking faster as it went on. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and sat in silence for a long moment. The galaxy is going to have to adjust, she finally said. I nodded. The galaxy is going to have to adjust. Humans are here now. They're in our academies, our militaries, our institutions. They're small, soft, physically unimpressive by most standards. They also carry thousands of years of experience in asymmetric warfare, tactical adaptation, and creative problem-solving when faced with enemies that should absolutely kill them first. We thought we were doing them a favor, inviting them into our prestigious academy, sharing our superior knowledge and training. Turns out they were doing us a favor by holding back. Maya Caldwell tried to avoid that fight. She really did. She gave Vorac every chance to walk away. And when he didn't, when he kept pushing and finally crossed the line, she taught the entire academy a lesson we desperately needed. Never underestimate humanity. Because on a planet where everything wanted to eat them, crush them, poison them, or tear them apart, humans still became the apex predator, not through brute strength, but through stubbornness, intelligence, endurance, and a terrifying willingness to do whatever it takes to survive. Welcome to the galactic community, humans. We're very glad you're on our side. Most of us, anyway.